beside you, because otherwise, just a weirdly close row of people. Just really, they all went, oh, that'll do. We'll sit there. All right, I reckon we'll crack into the day. Welcome aboard, everybody. Firstly, I know there is another conference occurring now at the same time at Te Pai. If you are at that one, then our conversations around pipes and asset management will be weirdly confusing, because you are supposed to be at the gynecological conference. But I'll tell you what, it'll be great. Really good. So do be careful today that you don't accidentally find yourself walking into a session that is not the session that you want over there. Secondly, congratulations to all of the people who received their awards last night at the Downer Gala dinner. What about a round of applause for all of those wonderful water professionals? I did not attend that. I was at the cultural dinner and it was excellent. We had for those of you who know the beautiful song Pokare Kari Ana, we had a beautiful rendition of that from Dr. Asari, who just continues to amaze. And a very enjoyable evening was had by all. And again, congratulations to everyone who put that on. I know certainly our foreign friends enjoyed that greatly. For those of you who are enjoying this, like I really love this particular building, the Town Hall. And if you are thinking, gosh, how did this come about? Look, there's an excellent documentary about it as well. If you are fans of architecture or architecture documentaries, there's a film called Morris and I, M-A-U-R-I-C-E, around Warris and Marnie, the world-renowned New Zealand architects, and their legacy and their career, and particularly this is a particularly special building for Christchurch, and it's a particularly special building in the global world of acoustic engineering. There was a lot of brilliant firsts in here, so if you are at all interested in that, it may well be on the plane on your way home, unless of course you're flying domestically on Air New Zealand, when what you will watch is just the back of the seat in front of you for a long period of time, or look out the window. Look, we would not be here without the support of our sponsors, and we do really, again, want to thank all of them. So there they are. A massive thanks to our Premier partners and the Water New Zealand Conference and Expo Premier partners, City Care Water, Fulton Hogan Water, Hines, Veolia and Neura, and our IWA-ASPIRE Premier partners, Oricon and Xylem. What about a round of applause for all of them? We will see a few more videos from them. The wonderful Robert will be introducing those as he goes through the course of the session this morning. Thanks to our regulatory partner, Water Services Authority, Taumata Arowai. I've sat through some of their excellent papers over the last couple of days. And of course to the others as well, to Datascape, Fonterra, SH and WSP. Also again to Lutra Applied Instruments, Flowvac, Blue Current, Oricon, Downer and Gentrack, each of those picking up some of those little things that make conferences like this possible. Everything from the digital marketing through to the coffee carts, the welcome functions, the various dinners, the Young Water Professionals networking event. We can't do what we do without their support, and we are very, very grateful for each and every one of those businesses. So again, what about a round of applause for each and every one of them. I think that is pretty much all of the housekeeping, unless anybody has any questions. I've covered it, Robert. Yes. I reckon I'm going to throw to you and allow you to moderate this session. So if you don't know Robert Boss, This is him right here. He's a senior advisor to IWA and co-chair of IWA-ASPIRE, and it gives me enormous pleasure to welcome him to the session right now. Kia ora, Robert.
Thank you very much, Reda. Where am I with my coat? Okay, good morning to all, friends, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. I trust you all had a wonderful evening in your respective dinners last night. So what is better to have at the morning after a copious meal to have a discussion on sanitation? And that's what we're here for in this plenary session. We have 3 speakers. We have 2 separate panels because we had an abundance of panelists, so we split them over 2 panels. But before I go into that, I want to, as per the tradition of this country, say something about my links, my origin, where I come from. I come from the sea, the country by the sea, which basically most of part of it is actually under sea level. It's a delta and a wetland area, the Netherlands. Most of the Netherlands is actually reclaimed land by my ancestors who started building windmills in the 17th century. And I should add that I was born on the night of the 31st of January and the 1st of February 1953. That was a night where there was a northwesterly storm over the North Sea with a force of 12 Beauforts, so a really big storm. And it was springtide because of the position of the moon. So the water levels rose to an unprecedented level along the Netherlands coast. And as a result, in the province of Zeeland, which is the islands where the delta comes out, the dikes broke and a lot of land went underwater. It was actually a sort of one ill health event, because 1,860 people drowned, 50,000 heads of cattle were lost, and 150,000 hectares of land was silted. It was very rich clay land for agriculture, but it took several years before it could be recovered and be put to function again. So the response of the Dutch, of course, to that has been to build floodworks, hydraulic infrastructure to protect that area. It started in the 60s and it lasted for 3 decades almost to get all those works ready. This last June, I had the pleasure of having Daryl Day and his wife come with me and visit that. So if you want an unbiased assessment of the Dutch hydraulic works, then talk to Daryl. And of course, we also have, and I'm not sure whether she's here, we have the Netherlands water envoy here, Meike van Ginneke. Are you in the room, Meike? Or maybe she's not yet. But she will be on stage this afternoon, and she can also tell you all about what the Netherlands has to offer in terms of expertise, experience, and knowledge when it comes to building such floodworks. Of course, many people in the Zeeland province were left without homes, and many decided to emigrate from the country. Many came to what was the obvious maybe alternative when you come from Zeeland, you go to New Zealand, and so they came here, and there's still quite a lot contingent here. In the meantime, now we have climate change. That was only a twinkle in God's eye when this all happened, but now it's a reality, and the Dutch are working hard to make sure that their infrastructure is upgraded and adapted to the needs of rising sea levels. I myself moved to Switzerland, which was a cautious move, so I sit high and dry in the Alps for whatever sea level rise may happen. But I went there to work for the World Health Organization, and that brings us back to sanitation, because of course the WHO has always, since its foundation in 1948, had a strong water and sanitation program, as many of you will know. In that program recently, sanitation has had a lot of attention. The drinking water quality guidelines seem to have been there forever, at least I know since the 1950s. But sanitation, as always, was a stepchild. But we now have several documents, normative documents about sanitation, sanitation safety planning, and now also, and that is actually the starting point for this discussion, the roadmap for sanitation regulation strengthening. Thanks to a countrywoman of you in New Zealand, Kate Medley-Cott, who is in Geneva and who is responsible for sanitation there. So without further ado, we move ahead with the program. We have 3 speakers, and the first one I will introduce to you is Raveen Jaduram from New Zealand. Here he is the Chair Water Services Authority of Taumata, Arowai, the New Zealand Regulator. He's also Chair of the Board of New Zealand Infrastructure Commission, and he will talk to you about the broader policy framework in this connection. Raveen, the floor is yours. And a big round of applause for you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for coming, because as you can see, others who overindulged have decided to sleep in. It's a privilege to be here this morning on a much sunnier and warmer Christchurch. I have to do a disclosure. So any opinion that I state are my own, and they do not represent the views of Taumata Arowai, because I do have a tendency sometimes to say things which could get me into trouble. As regulators, we are advocates for the consumers. We ensure water services are safe, reliable, and fairly priced, and that wastewater services are effective. We protect consumers, stakeholders, and the environment. We are like guard dogs, a Doberman. Our presence should, by itself, be enough to ensure compliance. Occasionally, those who test us will find that we might bark, but we can bite, and we will bite. So we will consult, we will inform, we will educate, and we will enforce. So our journey in New Zealand has been a short one. We've been taking baby steps. The Water Services Authority, Taumata Arowai, was only established in 2021 in response to the 2016 Havelock North drinking water contamination. Our primary focus was drinking water, but with additional legislation passed as recently as this year, we have additional functional responsibilities, and oversight of wastewater and stormwater is one of them. So how do we regulate wastewater, sewerage, sanitation, services in a way that protects public health and the environment, and for all citizens, not just those who are lucky enough to be connected to a major network? And this is not an abstract problem. It is real, it is immediate, and it is consequential. Across the globe, the wastewater regulation is undergoing a transformation. The World Health Organization's Roadmap to Sanitation Regulation, the document, recognizes this with 3 key highlights. Firstly, regulatory autonomy matters. Regulators must be free from political influence. Secondly, mandates must be clear. Fragmented responsibilities create confusion. And thirdly, there must be adequate resources. Without trained people and reliable data, rules are meaningless. These are not theoretical ideals, they're practical necessities. Without them, regulation risks being little more than rules on paper, unenforced and probably unenforceable. Yet we know change is possible. Zambia, Malaysia, and Brazil are examples of countries that with systematic reform, strong legal foundations, transparent accountabilities, and consistent capacity building are transforming wastewater into truly regulated public service. But as we all know, there is often a gulf between rules on paper and regulatory reality on the ground. In New Zealand, we see this most starkly in the knowledge crisis about our own infrastructure. The public is losing confidence in our capability to deliver public infrastructure. How can we not have looked after our public water assets for so long? Why are there so many deferred investments? Why is there so much talk about price of water doubling, tripling in the next few years? Little wonder there is a resigned sense that nothing is working, nothing is happening. There's a lot of talk. Recently, a celebrated colleague left our shores for greener pastures. When questioned about the completion date and cost of his rail project, his response was, "It will cost what it will cost." Such comments would be made by those devoid of responsibility and accountability of the public purse. Project managers must deliver to scope, on program, and to budget. After all, that is what differentiates those who are good and those who are mediocre. But when we start celebrating the mediocre, we begin to set a new standard for what is good. I digressed here because as regulators, we cannot pursue perfection, as that would be costly and for most unattainable. We can also not embrace mediocrity, so we need to be credible and trustworthy. So let me share a snapshot of our latest performance reports. Less than 50% of councils can provide accurate data on their networks. About 30% of all water is lost through leaks, hundreds of millions of cubic meters. The leakage index is off the charts in some places. 20% of wastewater plants are currently operating under expired consents, and about 45% of the consents will expire in the next decade. And some consents have gone unenforced for many years. In short, it hasn't been effective. In short, that's mediocre. So more than half of the councils are operating in deficit. Rural councils spend double per person what urban councils do, and yet achieve lower levels of service. They get less bang for the buck. Wastewater overflows are poorly monitored, sometimes only verbally reported, with most having no consent in place. We cannot regulate what we cannot measure, and we cannot manage what we do not understand. That is why, as the Water Services Authority, we place emphasis on robust data collection and analytics. Information only becomes powerful when it is turned into insight, and insight into action. Where councils implement metering, monitoring, and transparent reporting, performance improves, and they improve fast. This year alone, regulatory disclosure drove a 26% improvement in asset assessment and a 14% rise in risk identification. That is proof that when operators know that they are being measured against clear expectations, standards rise across the sector. So how fragmented is our wastewater regulatory function here in New Zealand? The roadmap identifies regulatory fragmentation as one of the biggest hurdles. In New Zealand, multiple agencies share responsibility. The regional and unitary councils have been primary regulators for wastewater and stormwater discharges under the Resource Management Act since the early 1990s. The Water Services Authority, as I said, is the primary regulator for drinking water and now has oversight of wastewater and stormwater. The Commerce Commission has recently stepped in as the economic regulator, starting with information disclosure to better understand sector performance. And the Environment Protection Agency has a role in projects of national significance, but may also take enforcement action from regional councils. And if that was not complex enough, reform of the resource management system is adding further layers raising questions about the future role of regional councils and pushing us towards nationally consistent standards. The multitude of agencies involved creates double burden. Regulators must constantly coordinate, while water service providers must navigate a maze of requirements. And when systems are fragmented, the various regulatory agencies need to collaborate and work with a single focus of addressing the consumer issue. Over the past 6 months, the Minister has been exercised about high water losses in one of the councils, about wastewater overflows that has been closing down commercial fisheries at another, and with developers complaining about the lack of infrastructure to allow for growth. And when he approached us, Taumata, Arowai, and then the Commerce Commission, what it demonstrated was that there are still cracks in the regulatory roles. The stakeholder interests are not well covered. The good news is that we are making progress. Earlier this year, the Water Services Authority consulted on New Zealand's first wastewater environmental performance standards for the discharge of treated wastewater from municipal wastewater treatment plants. These standards are designed to streamline consenting and lift environmental performance across the networks. They provide certainty to the applicants and will significantly reduce the costs and increase compliance in time. Alongside this, the authority has gained new tools through the Water Services Act. Firstly, the preparation of national engineering design standards and codes of practice to encourage standardization in design, construction, and operational performance. Together, these measures are building a platform for higher, more consistent performance, exactly what the World Health Organization roadmap suggests. Fortunately, we're not beginning from nothing. Other countries have wrestled with these challenges, and their solutions are instructive. Japan has a dual ministry approach, dividing responsibilities between centralized and decentralized systems. They regulate decentralized sanitation as a legitimate service, setting outcome-based standards while allowing flexibility in technology. The result? Near universal coverage despite geographic and demographic diversity. In Malaysia, they have created SPAN, a national commission with oversight across the sector. By clearly separating asset ownership, operation, and regulation, and by centrally managing services, they have achieved impressive performance while allowing operators local flexibility. In Singapore, well, Singapore is always different, right? Their model works. Their institutions are strong, consistent, and well-resourced, and enforcement is certain. Accountability in Singapore is non-negotiable. Despite their differences, Japan, Malaysia, and Singapore all embody the WHO roadmap. Solid legal frameworks, clear roles, accountability with teeth, reliable data systems, and ongoing capacity building. So what's the roadmap for New Zealand? What would it look like if New Zealand fully embraced the World Health Organization roadmap suggestions? Well, one, we will have accountability with transparency. Two, we'll have a community voice institutionalized. Three, we will align with the consent cycle, because the next decade is going to bring a wave of wastewater consent applications. And this is our opportunity to close the gap, align our environmental and health standards, and give operators certainty. And four, smart investment and climate resilience will be necessary for us. For me, the path forward rests on three pillars: regulatory integration, unifying environmental, health, customer, and economic oversight in a coherent national system; Climate resilience, regulate not just for today's condition, but for the shocks and stresses of the future. Smart investment, using reliable data to direct scarce resources where the delivery will be of greatest benefit. Our shared objective is within reach. Sustainable, cost-efficient service delivery, clear, effective regulation with no duplication, a healthy environment protected by enforceable standards, safe, equitable treatment of wastewater for all citizens. But achieving this requires more than technical fixes. It requires trust, accountability, and above all, the will to act. Because at the end of the day, sanitation is not just about pipes, plants, or consents. It is about people. It is about whether children will grow up free from waterborne diseases, whether rivers and beaches will remain places of life and recreation, whether communities, urban and rural, can trust their basic needs, trust that their basic needs are being met safely and sustainably. We have a once-in-a-generation chance to reset our system. If we align with the World Health Organization roadmap, integrate our regulation, and keep people at the center, New Zealand can not only meet today's challenges, we can set a global benchmark for trust, performance, and equity in water services. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Raveen. That was very interesting and gives a picture of what the future may look like and what needs to be done to make it look like that in an ideal world. We're now going to briefly interrupt for a message from one of our sponsors, a video from Hind. Stay with us. Okay, we go to our next speaker, and that is Patrick Lester T. from the Philippines. Patrick, please go over. He is the Chief Regulator of Metropolitan Waterworks and Sewerage System and the Regulatory Office in Manila, the Philippines. He has actually contributed importantly with his case study to the roadmap of WHO that we were already mentioning. And he was the youngest person ever to be appointed Chief Regulator of the Metropolitan Waterworks and Sewerage System. So that's also a good message for our young water professionals. You don't have to be old to become an important regulator. And he has driven major improvements in water, sewage and sanitation services across Metro Manila and nearby provinces. Patrick, the floor is yours.
Thank you. By the way, I will be asking 2 questions at the end with tokens awarded to the first 2 correct answers so that it will incentivize people to listen. Good morning, distinguished guests, partners in development, colleagues, and friends. It is a great honor to stand before you today to talk about a subject that in many ways defines the health, dignity, and resilience of our communities, sanitation. When we think about the pressing development challenges of our time, let us admit, sanitation is not the first thing that comes to our mind. But the truth is, sanitation is not just about pipes, treatment plants, or dislodging trucks. It is fundamentally about people. It is about the health of our families, the dignity of our communities, the cleanliness of our rivers and waterways, and the resilience of our cities in the face of climate change. And so today, I want to share with you how the Metropolitan Waterworks and Sewerage System Regulatory Office, or the MWSSRO, plays a pivotal role in shaping the future of water and sanitation in Metro Manila, a metropolis of more than 16 million people, or nearly times 3 the entire population of New Zealand. Through a public-private partnership with two concessionaires, Manilla Water in the West Zone and Manilla Water in the East Zone, we ensure that access to clean water and safe sanitation is not only delivered, but continuously improved upon. Our work goes beyond regulation. It is about building trust, driving innovation, and safeguarding the well-being of our communities by making water and sanitation central to sustainable urban growth. Let me begin by painting a picture of the challenges we face. Metro Manila generates thousands of tons of wastewater every single day. Yet historically, only a fraction of this wastewater has been collected and treated properly. Much of it has ended up in our rivers, groundwater, and coastal waters. The result? Polluted waterways, higher incidence of waterborne diseases, contaminated groundwater, and a city vulnerable to flooding and climate impacts. This isn't just an environmental challenge. It is also a human challenge. Untreated wastewater represents a risk to public health and to our children's safety. And because of the consequences of poor sanitation, fall most heavily on the disadvantaged, particularly women, children, the elderly, persons with disabilities, and the poor. Sanitation is also a matter of equity, gender, and social justice. Women and girls in particular often bear the burden of inadequate sanitation. They are more exposed to health risks, face safety and dignity concerns when facilities are lacking, and frequently carry the responsibility of caring for sick family members affected by waterborne diseases. Ensuring inclusive gender-sensitive sanitation services, therefore, means not only protecting health and the environment, but also advancing gender equality and empowering our most vulnerable citizens. At the MWSSRO, we have made it our mission to confront this challenge head-on. Our vision is clear. Every Filipino in Metro Manila must have access to safe, reliable, and sustainable wastewater services. To achieve this, we have adopted a dual-track strategy in the meantime. On one track, we are accelerating the expansion of sewerage networks. This is the long-term foundational solution. Large-scale wastewater treatment plants and sewer systems are the backbone of any modern city sanitation infrastructure. They allow us to capture and treat volumes of wastewater in a systemic way. But we also know that building an entire sewerage networks takes time. Right now, Metro Manila has only a sewer coverage of 25%. And in a dense and urban area like Metro Manila, installing a new sewerage infrastructure on existing roads are especially challenging. It requires massive investment, careful planning, and years of construction. We cannot afford to wait until every pipe is laid and every treatment plant is built. And so, our second track focuses on strengthening sanitation through dislodging services. By promoting regular dislodging of septic tanks, we ensure that wastewater in areas not yet connected to sewers is still safely managed and treated in an environmentally responsible way. In Metro Manila, our concessionaires provide dislodging services once every 5 years to all residential customers, and the cost of such services is already included in their monthly water bill. That means they do not have to pay every time once the dislodging tanks go to them. But not everyone is aware that they are entitled to these services. That is why We, the MWSSRO, embarked on an awareness campaign through social media and through traditional media like the televisions, radio stations, and print to raise awareness about the fact that they can have their septic dislodged and that they should have their septic tanks dislodged. So this dual approach, network sewerage plus non-networks dislodging, allows us to address the urgent needs of today while building towards the vision of tomorrow. As an aside, we also encourage the sustainable use of the byproducts of the wastewater treatment process. In addition to converting the byproducts for fertilizers or soil conditioners, Manilla Water, in partnership with Cemex Philippines, uses biosolids as alternative fuels, a first in the Philippines and a major accomplishment in helping address climate change. On the other hand, Manilla has initiated its BioBricks project, which involves converting biosolids into bricks that the company will utilize for construction. Both these projects will support a circular economy where all resources are reused and maximized. We also have, by the way, we also have the first direct potable treatment facility in all of Asia. So we are doing complete circular water reuse already. I'm also proud to share that our efforts are not just making an impact on the ground, they are also being recognized at the national level. Our dislodging awareness campaign, which emphasized the importance of septic tank maintenance, was recently honored at the 21st Philippine Quill Awards and other award-giving bodies on communication. But more important than the awards is what they represent. That sanitation, once a silent and often neglected issue, is now part of the public conversation. By raising awareness, by using innovative campaigns, and by making sanitation something that families talk about, we are breaking the stigma and helping communities take ownership of their health. Of course, no strategy can succeed without a strong and sustainable financial foundation. Let us be clear, building climate-resilient sanitation infrastructure is not cheap. Treatment plants, sewer networks, dislodging fleets, all of these require billions of dollars in investment. And so, we had to ask ourselves, how do we finance all of this while protecting the public? The answer lies in a carefully designed regulatory framework. Tariff adjustments are a regulator's main accountability mechanism. It is both a carrot and a stick. The primary task of the MWSSRO is to determine a reasonable tariff and monitor the performance of the concessionaires. In Metro Manila, the tariff rate is adjusted every 5 years during the rate rebasing period. Performance targets are agreed upon, including targets on water, sewer, and sanitation. Within this framework, the MWSSRO and the concessionaires agree on clear targets and capital investment requirements, providing quarterly and annual reports to the MWSSRO against defined KPIs and BEMS. A key function of rate rebasing activity is the balance between the financial viability of the service provider, affordability, including for low-income customers, and the quality of service. The tariff model in Metro Manila allows for full cost recovery with no government subsidy. It is based on user or polluter pays principle. That is why our tariff tables are structured to ensure that the cost of water and sanitation are shared equitably and sustainably. One key feature of the tariff model is our cross-subsidy system. High-volume residential, commercial, and industrial consumers shoulder a larger share of the cost, while low-volume users, especially the poor, benefit from heavily subsidized rates. At the same time, we are enhancing our Lifeline rate program, which specifically supports low-income families by providing them additional subsidies to ensure that no household is left behind. This way, we achieve the first two objectives at once: financial viability of our concessionaires and affordability of our most vulnerable citizens. Looking ahead, we plan to introduce a new billing structure where sanitation costs are clearly segregated from water costs. Why? because we want the public to fully understand and appreciate the cost of sanitation. Transparency builds trust, and awareness builds support. But let me emphasize something crucial. Tariff increases are never automatic. At the MWSSRO, we have designed a system where tariff adjustments are tied to performance to ensure the third element of our tariff framework, quality of service. This means that our concessionaires must first deliver results based on key performance indicators, whether that's providing safe and continuous water supply, expanding sewer coverage, or achieving dislodging targets before any tariff increase will be implemented. In other words, we protect the public by making sure that our two concessionaires meet these KPIs so that what the public is paying are for real, measurable service and not empty promises. This approach ensures accountability and strengthens trust between the concessionaires and the communities they serve. So now let's talk about partnership. Sanitation for all is not something that the MWSSRO or the concessionaires can achieve alone. It requires strong collaboration with the local government units or the LGU. After all, LGUs are on the front lines. They engage with the communities, they oversee land use and zoning, and they can mobilize citizens at the local level. Unfortunately, not every local government sees sanitation as a top priority. Sometimes it competes with other urgent needs like housing, traffic, or business. To encourage LGUs to take sanitation seriously, we launched an awards program to recognize the cities and municipalities with the highest dislodging rates and the highest sewer coverage. By celebrating the leaders, we hope to inspire others to follow their examples. We believe that by keeping the conversation alive, by celebrating champions, and by showing tangible benefits of sanitation, more LGUs will step up. Of course, we are not naive. We know that there are significant challenges ahead. Rapid urbanization is straining our infrastructure faster than we can expand it. Climate change is bringing more intense floods, which makes sanitation even more critical. Public awareness is still uneven, and changing behavior takes time. And yes, financing remains a constant balancing act between affordability and sustainability. But these challenges are not reasons for despair. They are reasons for action. They remind us of the critical role of regulation to address this. So as we move forward, I want to emphasize that sanitation is not just the responsibility of one agency or one regulator or one concessionaire. It is a shared responsibility. It requires the cooperation of the government, the private sector, local communities, and individual households. It requires us to think not just about here and now, but about the generations that will come after us. Because in the end, sanitation is not about technology, it is about people. It is about whether a child can grow up free from waterborne diseases. It is about whether a community can enjoy clean rivers and safe streets. It is about whether Metro Manila can stand as a model of resilience and sustainability for the rest of the Philippines. So let me leave you with this thought. When we invest in sanitation, we are not just building pipes and treatment plants, we are building a healthier future, a more sustainable environment, and a more resilient city. We are investing in dignity, in equity, and in hope. The MWSS Regulator Office is committed to pioneering this path, but we cannot do it alone. We need the continued partnership of our concessionaires, our LGUs, our national government agencies, civil societies, and each and every one of you here today. Together, we can ensure that sanitation is no longer an afterthought, but a foundation of our collective future. Thank you, and thank you very much. And maraming salamat po. For the questions, what are the names of the two water concessionaires in Metro Manila? Yes. And who's the second one? There's two. For the second one, who else can answer? The second one. Manila Water and?
Manilla.
Manilla. Okay, thank you. I'll give you a token later. Thank you.
Patrick, thanks very much. Thank you very much, Patrick, for having the focus on the circularity that, of course, Catherine Richardson also talked about a lot yesterday, and also about not leaving anyone behind, also in the peri-urban, low-income, often informal communities around Manila. So we'll have another interruption by a sponsor video, this time by Nura. Right. We now move to the third speaker, who will be telling us more about the actual roadmap that you've been hearing so much about and get into the details. David Cunliffe, he's a Principal Water Quality Advisor of Health South Australia, and he's a representative of the World Health Organization at this meeting for this topic. He's been a regulator for over 40 years with experience dealing with public health aspects of drinking water, wastewater and recreational water, and he has been a long-time supporter of the various normative documents that WHO has been presenting. So a big hand for David Cunliffe, please.
So thank you very much, and thank you very much for the organisers for inviting me to attend this wonderful conference. And by way of background, I'm from Adelaide. Some of you will possibly know that Adelaide is the sister city to Christchurch. Colonel William Light had a hand in the design of both of our cities, which have a number of similarities. So I'm going to talk about sanitation regulation in my state of South Australia, with reference to the WHO roadmap. So by way of background, we have three layers of government in Australia. We have local government, we have state governments, and we have federal government. Regulation of water and wastewater is a state issue. We have national guidelines. We have national guidelines for water recycling, and we have national standards for components such as on-site systems, plumbing, and construction. And those national standards are developed with input by the states and territories, and they're endorsed by the states and territories, so they're generally applied relatively consistently across the country. And perhaps one message is that regulation of sanitation in Australia is more complete, is more complex, it involves more agencies than regulation of drinking water, but has a much longer history. We've actually paid greater attention to sanitation than we have to drinking water. And there are a number of reasons for that. We do regulate drinking water, but we've regulated sanitation longer. So this is the roadmap. It includes 6 components. The reason for developing the roadmap, and as Robert said, development of the roadmap was led by a New Zealander, Kate Medlicott. So you have input into this as a nation. The reason for developing the roadmap is that monitoring for implementation of the UN Sustainability Development Goal number 6 has consistently shown that we're not meeting the targets. We're falling behind the 2030 targets for improving access to safe drinking water and safe sanitation. And this is particularly the case for sanitation. UN Water Global Analysis and Assessment of Sanitation reported that one of the reasons that sanitation is falling behind is weakness in regulation. So the roadmap responds to that. It aims to provide a framework for strengthening regulation. It provides a step-by-step guidance in 6 components. It addresses economic, environmental, and public health regulation, and provides active regulation of service providers. It includes activities such as licensing, monitoring, ensuring compliance, and performance benchmarking. As I said, it contains these 6 components, but recognises that flexible applications required. Countries are in different stages of implementation of sanitation. They'll have different entry points into these 6 components, and some of the components may not apply, depending on the unique circumstances of each country. So, I have a very small screen in front of me, so I am going to turn around and look at the bigger screen behind, because unlike the previous speaker, I'm not the youngest regulator in the room. So the first component is to, they've blown it up on the front, thank you. They've recognised that I have this grey hair, and so the first component is to establish the current legal basis for service regulation, then review and strengthen the institutional and regulatory framework, to develop, then thirdly, develop accountability mechanisms, including for on-site sanitation. The fourth component is to establish data management systems to inform regulation and service improvement. The fifth is to strengthen regulator and service provider capacity and incentives. And then finally, to review, iterate, and adapt to emerging challenges. So, in my state, in South Australia, the legal basis for sanitation, the first component, we have public health wastewater regulations, and the latest version, 2013. We had earlier versions. And the wastewater regulations administer policies, prescribe codes and approvals for wastewater collection, for treatment, reuse and disposal. It includes reticulated wastewater systems, on-site systems, and use of recycled water. All of those need to be approved. We've got the Environment Protection Act and the associated water quality policy, and which works in conjunction with the planning system to ensure the protection of South Australian waters and land from pollution by wastewater discharges is achieved. We have economic regulation through the Water Industry Act 2012, which is administered by the Essential Services Commission. This provides economic regulation and deals with customer obligations. And then finally, planning regulations, which sets minimum sanitation requirements for new developments. The second component, the institutional and regulatory framework, my agency, SA Health, administers the Public Health Act. As I said before, all wastewater treatment schemes and on-site systems need to be approved, with the exception of the wastewater treatment plants constructed by our major government-owned water utility. They're our lead engineering agency in the state, and it's felt that they know what they're doing, and largely they do. All recycled water systems need approval, and my agency identifies treatment requirements for biosolids. EPA regulates the environmental aspects of wastewater discharges and disposal and use of biosolids, deals with construction of lagoon systems to make sure they don't leak into the environment, deals with buffer zones of treatment plants from residential areas. And we have this competing need to develop land, to build more houses, and where we once built wastewater treatment plants, which were a long, long way away from houses, now they're very close. And sometimes we have competing needs. EPA issues licenses for the larger schemes and works with my agency on management of on-site systems. And the EPA, in conjunction with the Department of Environment and Water, regulates aquifer storage of wastewaters. And we've got a number of schemes where that's applied. The Essential Services Commission administers the economic components. They license private providers of both drinking water and wastewater services. And Planning SA regulates development proposals, which include requirements for waste management for buildings and dwellings. So in my state, you cannot build a house unless you have an approved sanitation system. So that's really the essence of why we've had tighter control on sanitation in some ways than drinking water. You actually can build a house without being connected to a drinking water system, and a lot of houses in my state have rainwater tanks to provide drinking water services. That's in the rural areas. We have a big water utility that provides drinking water to about 96–97% of the state. Planning SA also deals with wastewater treatment facilities, so they need development applications, and they deal with facilities that contain and treat biosolids. Accountability mechanisms. We've got, as I said before, Australian and New Zealand standards for on-site domestic wastewater devices. So in my state, we have approved devices. So a householder can actually go to our website, see a list of approved devices, and if they install one of those, it's a straightforward process. And we have building and plumbing codes that includes the need for sanitation, includes requirements and specifications for sanitation. We have the Australian Guidelines for Water Recycling, which deals with everything from irrigation of tree lots to irrigation of salad vegetables to purple pipe systems where you supply recycled water for toilet flushing, garden irrigation in homes. We have the South Australian On-Site Wastewater Systems Code, which deals with approval of on-site wastewater products for installation and individual connections of those systems to community wastewater management systems. We have South Australian guidelines for the safe handling and reuse of biosolids. And as I said before, we have an economic regulator that sets service fees. We also have arbitration of customer complaints through the economic regulator, and if that fails, we have a state energy and water ombudsman that customers can use if they feel the need to. And then finally, in terms of accountability, we have national performance reporting for urban water services, which includes wastewater. Includes a whole range of measures, including repairs of sewer systems, including response to complaints. In terms of data management systems, SA Health has established an online system for operators, and that includes annual reporting of wastewater treatment plant performance. It includes supply and use of recycled water and applications for approval of wastewater works. And SA Health, in conjunction with EPA, have established a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week instant notification and communication system for operators. And generally that requires notification of any incident If it's a serious one, within an hour. If it's slightly less serious, the same day of occurrence. And that way, SA Health and EPA can direct the remedial responses and the repairs. In terms of strengthening regulator and service provider capacity, SA Health provides in-house training for local government officers on on-site systems and on operation of centralised treatment systems and use of recycled water for those schemes that are operated by local government. So our treatment and recycle systems are either controlled by councils or the major utility. And SA Health supports local government in assessing and approving on-site systems, with particular attention to larger systems and non-standard or innovative systems. As I said before, we have a website that lists all the standard approved systems. And if a landholder wants to build a house and install one of those systems, straightforward approval. If they want something innovative, then it can be a longer process because we have to check that those systems work. The final component is review, iterate, and adapt to emerging challenges. So all our regulations and codes of practice, including the wastewater regulations, EPA water quality policy, and codes of practice, are subject to periodic reviews. The reviews need to keep up to date with changing practices and emerging technologies. So, for example, application of health-based targets and validation of treatment processes. So health-based targets from the WHO guidelines. Technologies such as high-rate algal ponds, passive secondary on-site systems, aerated greywater processing systems, and they're generally in buildings. One of our favourite systems. Our experience is that building greywater systems, by the way, often fail in a relatively short period. And for small modular recycling systems. We need to consider and respond to emerging issues. So a big one at the moment, PFAS in biosolids, but there's also antimicrobial resistant organisms, microplastics and nanoplastics. My final slide, successes and challenges. So in Australia, a very high percentage of the population have public or private sanitation systems, including on-site systems, greater than 99%. Increasing amounts of treated wastewater is being recycled, and now as new plants are being built, there is a requirement, particularly in the local government sphere, to reuse rather than discharge, wherever possible. It's not all success stories, so maintenance and management of on-site wastewater systems remains an ongoing challenge, because often that's in the realm of the householder with oversight by local government, but it's not always efficient as it could be. Growing populations are placing increasing pressure on delivery of wastewater systems, and emerging chemicals will need to be addressed in dealing with biosolids, and at the moment our biggest issue is PFAS and how that might inhibit biosolids reuse. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, David. Very good. Thank you, David, for this overview of how the framework of the roadmap translates in Australia into action and structures and processes. It was very interesting. Now, before we say goodbye to our speakers, we're going to have another 2 sponsored videos for you.
Water. It flows through every part of our lives. It feeds us, clothes us, powers us, renews us. But our changing world is putting water at risk right when we need it most. One company is leading the way with solutions that empower communities and businesses to build a more water-secure world. That company is Xylem, optimizing water and wastewater systems to ensure clean and safe water in large cities and remote communities, serving industry with the quality of water needed to produce everyday goods, making buildings more water efficient, supplying the water that keeps essential services operating, while pioneering water reuse to recycle more of the water we use. Xylem innovates and collaborates with global reach, combined with local know-how, to champion those who make water work every day. Together, we're building a more water-secure world.
Okay, please join me in a big applause for our three speakers, David, Raveen, and Patrick. Thank you very much. And then we move on to the panels. So I'd like to invite the first three panelists for the panel that will discuss technical and managerial issues to come on the stage, please. We have first of all, Dato Ahmed Faisal Abdurrahman, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the National Water Services Commission in Malaysia. We've already had several mentions and references to that span. That leadership is based on 30 years of experience in government-linked companies, asset management, and utility operations. So he has driven regulatory innovation, environmental enforcement, and financial inclusion into these initiatives. So welcome, Faisal. Then we have, of course, our friend from Xylem. This is, let me check, Hayati Yarkadas, Senior Vice President and dealing with water infrastructure. He's based in Switzerland. And he leads Xylem's global water infrastructure segment, bringing together all aspects of the company's transport and treatment businesses. His team collaborates with public utilities and industrial customers to ensure their operations run effectively through integrated products and systems. And finally, we have Daisuke Sano, who is a professor of environmental water quality at Tohoku University in Japan. And he has been having quite an interesting career path, but most recently, since 2017, he's back at Tohoku University, where he's responsible for research and supervision of international and domestic projects in the field of water and public health. And he's also one of the key persons behind the IWA health-related water micro specialist groups. So welcome all of you, and let's see whether, after these presentations that we've seen, we can look at, some of the issues that drive the process towards strengthening sanitation, regulation, as it has to happen in the countries in this region and in other regions. And I'd like to first go to you, Faisal, and see, since your regulatory agency in Malaysia has developed quite a reputation in the region as being very much in the forefront of things. How do you see the let's say, challenges, but also the facilitating, enabling factors to strengthen particularly sanitation regulation in this overall picture?
Thank you, Robert. First of all, I would like to share that Malaysia has about 96% coverage, sewerage services, of which 80% is connected services. And this is a result of almost 20 years where we established SPAN, or National Water Services Commission, in 2006. And we had a 30-year strategic plan to achieve sustainable services into the years, of which the first 10 years have been more about legal compliance and enforcement. So we have established the Act, and the next 10 years was fine-tuning the subsidiary legislations, rules and procedures, and also to refine the enforcement team and strategies. The second 10 years is more about achieving financial sustainability, and I'm happy to report that the National Sewerage Company in Malaysia last year has finally reached profitability after 20 years of being subsidized by the government. So it was a long way, but at least operationally it was profitable starting last year, and we hope to be able to move further. And Robert, the next 10 years will be more about achieving better efficiency, achieving circularity in our operations. And also, 20 years ago, we did not talk about ESG or environmental or climate change. But now, I think climate change and ESG matters very much in whatever we do. And we have a target to achieve net zero in 2050. So if you ask about challenges, for us, well, we have achieved a good coverage, financially, operationally sustainable. So now the challenges is more to be more efficient and also to achieve net zero. Thank you.
Okay, so in principle, you went through a phase of, let's say, creating the enabling environment, then you operationalized it, and then you adapted to new challenges and new needs that have been coming up.
In 20 years, there are too many ups and downs to share. A lot of challenges.
I can imagine.
The big picture is something like that.
Yeah,
thanks.
So Hayati, in this, very dynamic world of developing these type of sanitation regulation frameworks, how does Xylem see its role, and how does it bring about the support that governments may need in order to, achieve their regulatory frameworks and their sustainable sanitation goals?
Great. Good morning, everyone. Robert, great question. I work for a technology company, water technology company, happens to be one of the largest, with 23,000 colleagues we have around the world. We tend to be optimists. So you can't be a technologist and can innovate, and if you're not an optimist. I think we all understand what the challenges are. We've heard great proof points earlier with the great speakers we had. The good news is we have solutions, either business model solutions or technology solutions, to 95–97% of all the challenges that we are facing, be it in developed world or developing world. So we see regulation, Robert, as an accelerator for access to sanitation, sustainable sanitation, and clean water, access to clean water around the world. We need smart and practical regulation that is open for innovation, for reuse, for advanced treatment technologies, for adoption of digital technologies. Water industry is one of the very large industries in the world that has not adopted digital fully. So our systems are digital. The data that we collect from our networks are fragmented and lacking insight, as mentioned earlier. So we are optimists. With regulation, with partnership, both public and private sector partnership, we have the solutions. We need the regulation to accelerate adoption of these solutions.
Would you see that that is more pronounced in the sanitation sector than in the drinking water supply sector, that backwardness in digitalization?
We see it across. Both networks are large. They are complex, in thousands of kilometers of pipelines. Earlier there was a mention about leakages. That's not unique to New Zealand. The continent I live in Switzerland, an average non-revenue water across European continent is about 25–30%. So we have solutions and we have opportunities in both sanitation as well as clean water.
Okay, thank you. Daisuke, one of the things that came out very clearly from these presentations is the need to have a proper database in order to have good decision-making on regulations, both for water and sanitation. But looking at sanitation, you have done a lot of work on drinking water quality. How does sanitation now come into your work, the dealing with wastewater and the circularity of the whole thing? And do you feel that there are specific research gaps that should be addressed?
Yeah, okay. In the sanitation system, in my opinion, yes, now already had it said, the data digitalization is important, and we need to monitor the water quality and treatment performance in a timely fashion for the decision making. But sometimes the water quality monitoring in real time is very challenging. I know a lot of companies are developing the IoT, ICT technologies for doing that, but sometimes we are facing the difficulty, or it takes time to incorporate in the regulation. So yeah, that's kind of incorporation, development and incorporation of the digital sensors, physical sensor technologies in that making the database is very challenging and important at the moment.
Okay. Is that also the case in Malaysia, Faisal, that this database needs a lot of strengthening, and how do you interact with the academia to make sure that the necessary data are generated?
We have started some work to integrate all the data and also to refine the mapping of the GIS. And actually, we have the institution which did all this, or which helped us to do this, is the Academy of Science, which are made up by mostly professors. So they came up with the reports, and we are targeting to have a comprehensive system in the next 3 years. And we are quite lucky because the sewerage services in Malaysia is managed by just one company, which is the National Sewerage Company, IWK. So IWK has at least, I would say, 80% of all the pipes, and all the automations are aggressively done by IWK. And I think in order for us to do this, for the government to do this, IWK has at least 70–80% systems in place already. So we just need to refine 20–30% to make it 100% a completed system. But if I can just touch on another angle, just to share with the audience, although Malaysia has a good coverage, but the operations is highly inefficient, because historically the sewerage services was managed by the local councils, and everyone builds their own treatment plants. Right now, there are about 7,800 treatment plants in Malaysia, serving about 30 million population. Per treatment plant, on average, serves about 4,800 PE, which is highly inefficient. If we are looking at roughly 20,000 PE per treatment plant, we would only need about 1,700 treatment plants, which is a sharp reduction from 7,800 now. So our main strategy now, and also our main challenge now, is to rationalize and regionalize.
Right.
And it is not easy, and it costs a lot of money. But we have no choice, because if we want the sewerage services to be sustainable, we must go that route. Otherwise, to manage 7,800 plants, and most of them are old plants, you will not be sustainable. And we don't want to go like this and go back down again. Yeah. So, so for those countries which only start doing this, I would suggest, or I would advise, that you must have a national sewerage catchment plan, which based on the river basin, to make sure that the local councils don't just build as and when they need it, and also to have a national sewerage development plan based on the catchment plan.
Yeah.
We didn't have that. Now we're coming up with a national sewerage development plan, so that all developments are properly strategized to minimize inefficiency and also to maximize circularity. The location of the treatment plants are also important to have this, to make circular economy successful.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to build treatment plants far away from the industrial areas.
Yeah. Hayati, as a company, do you recognize yourself in the image that Faisal just shaped with, this idea of a more integrated, basin-wide approach, and the need to respond to that in terms of technology and approaches? And also, one thing is, of course, bringing in infrastructure, etc., but how does Xylem then help to support this in terms of capacity development? Could you say something about that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. When I go around the world and talk with our customers, water utility customers, I hear about what they're missing, what they need. Two things that they say they're not missing is data and apps. They have the data, they have the apps. Very often they have the right sensors. They have too much of them. They are awash with data. The role that companies like Xylem could play, and we are very proud to be in the center of it, is that how do you collect that data, eliminate the noise, and create insights, what I would call the 80 of the insights, the important insights that the utility needs to run their services efficiently at the right cost, and then deliver the right quality to their communities that they serve. Xylem View is one technology platform that we provide that pulls together all the data from the system, use AI, and then create insights to utilities to deliver their services. So that's exactly where our head is. So.
Right, okay. Suk, Hayati just mentioned sensors, and of course I know that there's a lot of activity going on in the drinking water world about sensors, real-time sensors, and more sophisticated methods of sensoring. How do you see the development of sensors in the field of wastewater management and treatment?
Yeah, so yes, so many types of the physical sensor have been developed and they can be incorporated. But on the other hand, sometimes they're very hard to monitor. For example, if you want to get BOD and COD, yes, it will take time to measure it. And yes, we have the sensor, but sometimes some parameters cannot be very well monitored by sensors. So in that case, probably in the academic side, we need to develop the kind of prediction models, mathematical models, to predict the effluent quality And using other data sets like pH, temperature, and influent some the sensor monitored quality is an input data set, and we can maybe able to predict the effluent quality or treatment performance. We call it soft sensor. And that kind of sensor should be also employed, not only physical sensors, but also these kinds of sensors can be available for our, this purpose of this monitoring.
And is AI becoming more prominent in that connection?
Yes, the AI and machine learning models is it's the basics, maybe in this, the application of soft sensor,
Okay, good. As you know, we have little time for the panels because we have another panel coming, but I would like maybe to from each one of you here, you've seen particularly David Cunliffe's presentation on the roadmap that WHO now has produced and that hopefully will help many countries to strengthen their regulatory framework. When you listened to that, did you think that there were things that were particularly spot on or things that were particularly missing from what has been set up by WHO? We'll start with Faisal.
I think, not to say spot on, but generally it's something like that. You start with the legislation and you go along technical and economic. But I think, yes, you must have a long-term roadmap, a solid strategy, but whatever you do, you must have a solid financial foundation to carry this through. And for example, in Malaysia, we recognize this, and of course, tariff is not an easy matter to, it involves political interests and things like that. However, in terms of infrastructure building, do not depend on the government, because the government usually have other priorities. So we must think of a way on how to help the industry to be sustainable. For example, just to share, in Malaysia, the Act stipulates that every developer must contribute 1% of the gross development value for sanitation purposes. Yes, and that fund, that trust fund, is managed by SPAN, and currently we have about $4 billion in it. And we help the operators to upgrades and help with the capex. So, because the fund has been about 20 years, so you know, it's quite sizable now. So we must start somewhere and don't depend on the government too much. Thank you.
Exactly. Hayati, do you have any perspective on the roadmap from your company's outlook?
I do. The words that I heard around, accountability, measure what really matters, the KPIs, performance-based contracts, and partnerships. Those are the things that, as technology provider, that we want to hear. And as I said at the beginning, I'm very encouraged with the roadmap and what it lays out.
Okay. And last, Daisuke.
Yes, this roadmap is very, very excellent and looks perfect, and almost nothing to add to be added. But so if in the future the kind of academic output, they're going to be in the practical, the output can be generated from the academic part. That's I hope this is going to be incorporated in this kind of roadmap, the information. Yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much to the three panelists. Hayati, Faisal, and Daisuke, please. And we move to the next panel. So can I call you all up to come here while I introduce you? We have, first of all, Naomi Karat, who is director of, let me look well, Research Director of the University of Technology in Sydney, Institute for Sustainable Future in Sydney, Australia. Welcome, Naomi. Then we have Chi Meng Pang from PUB, the Public Utilities Board in Singapore, who is now, Director of Water Quality there. And we have Then Dagmara, yes, she's there. So I'm looking at Naomi. Dagmara, who is the representative here, she is the leader for Veolia in New Zealand. So welcome all three of you. And we're now talking about the more economic and financial aspects of strengthening regulatory frameworks for sanitation. A first question, of course, is how do you see, from your perspectives, from your different angles, you know, academics, company, and public utility, how do you see the needs to invest in this, and what should the funding streams be? Where is the money coming from, and where should it go in order to strengthen these sanitation frameworks? Maybe I'll start with you, Naomi, and then we'll go that way. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you, Robert. So I grew up on river country on Bidjigal country, but now I work across Asia and the Pacific in low and middle income countries in partnership with organizations there. So that's the perspective I'm bringing today. We've heard a lot of cases of places with high coverage. We've heard about data abundance. That's not the situation in most of the places where I'm working, and so that's a really core consideration in thinking about how to manage financial and economic regulation as we try to seek to progress safe sanitation for all. And so what I want to share on that is a plug for using the principles of sustainable cost recovery. We heard an example of full cost recovery in one of the keynotes, and that's great, but it's simply not feasible for most places where sanitation is still emerging and there's a lot of work to do. And those three principles are firstly to think about an appropriate mix of the three T's, tariffs, taxes, and transfers, and I'd also add a fourth T of trade for that, so how reuse and sale of reuse products can add to the financial stream. The second principle is predictable public investment. We really need to have that strong public investment to achieve the public good outcomes from sanitation. And the third is to think about multiple perspectives, so who pays for what when, and to really balance affordability for households with the commercial viability of service providers. And there's a really strong role for regulators to play in ensuring a balance across those three principles.
Thank you very much. Dagmara, how would you see this issue of funding regulatory framework strengthening?
Yes, thank you for the question, Robert. So first of all, just to echo what my Xylem colleague has said, I think as a 107-year-old company, we are also optimists. We've been around the block quite a bit. We've seen a few things, and we've actually partnered over the years with our customers to provide innovative technologies. So we see the regulation as driving innovation as well as consistency. So I would really invite you to look at innovation as an enabler for positive financial outcomes. So looking at technologies that are more efficient, for instance, you can defer your savings on your OPEX into CAPEX investment or back into more innovative technologies. That's one aspect. Looking at modularity of systems, so delivering what you need right now, and again, deferring that capital spend for the future and for when you need it. And also in the context of existing assets, instead of building new assets, have a look at using innovative intensification technologies to intensify your existing assets, to not spend capital on building new assets. And also looking at alternative financial models. So rather than spending CAPEX now, you can rent equipment, you can lease equipment. There's lease to own models as well. So again, if capital isn't available to you right now, there's models that we can assist with as well. And also looking at alternative income streams, which is also another topic that the roadmap looks at. So I would really invite you to look at wastewater as not being wasteful at all. Wastewater is an income generator. We look at them as biofactories. You can recover a lot of resources from wastewater. That was mentioned on the panel in the presentations before as well. So looking at creating energy, fertilizers, and also we look at reusing that water. You already invested in a lot of capital, time, and money in treating that wastewater, and rather than dumping it, into other receiving bodies, I think it was mentioned before, building these facilities close to industry, you can resell that water into industry, for instance, and again, generate another income stream that way.
Okay, thank you for that. The circularity is very important.
The circular economy, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Robert, for inviting me to the panel. So I would like to briefly share about Singapore's journey in terms of sustainable regulating sanitary systems. So essentially, maybe I'll touch on the area, perhaps on maybe tariff setting. So if we look back like 60 years ago, Singapore was a developing country then, and I think the level of sanitation there was very low. The connection rate was perhaps about 40% in the 1960s. So what happened then was that I think two key developments happened. First, the pivotal development was that we started drafting a sewage master plan. So with that master plan, it lays out where the sewage has to be connected. We split the island into 6 sewage catchment zones, each to be served by a particular dedicated sewage treatment plant. So it is with these plans that the government starts building the network up through the years. But of course, a significant factor then was, of course, how then do we finance these particular sewage expansion plans? So we managed to obtain a loan from the World Bank, 2 loans, in fact, from the World Bank in the 60s and 70s to start the expansion plans. But in our engagement with the World Bank, there's also a precondition to these loans. The World Bank has stipulated that we have to perhaps institute a proper charging framework such that we properly recover the cost of running these sanitation systems from the consumers in order to sustainably operate them. So fast forward to today, we are now looking at a Singapore whereby we try to recycle every drop of wastewater to new water. So correspondingly, our tariff system have also sort of like changed to sort of reflect this, because now our wastewater charges are collected in the form of a tax called a waterborne tax, and it is charged based on the volume of water supplied to a particular premises. So what this means is that it will be used to cover the cost of treating the water as well as running the sewer networks. So essentially, this is how we have evolved as a nation in building up sustainable sanitation.
Okay, if I can stay with you for a moment, because of course one of the issues that we are faced with, apart from many countries having to set up their regulatory framework for sanitation, but when you have a regulatory framework for sanitation, many of the sanitation activities will now have an extra burden because they will need to be made climate resilient, and that adds another cost. And so how do you see as a utility that the sanitation regulator can actually help you in that process so that it is become an orderly process of investment rather than to have to go through rather a budget shock that requires you to bring in a whole lot of new elements that deal with the challenges of climate change?
I think that is not an easy question to answer. So actually there are 2 aspects, right? One, of course, is the sewage network connection, which is funded by capital investment through the sewers. So for that sort of big capital investment, I think the government has a regulation or legislation that allows us to finance capital investments that is of 50 years and beyond through private borrowing. So these are funded externally through a combination of, I think, either government funding or borrowing. But subsequently, when you talk about reused water, those new water plants are financed largely by additional tariffs that we sell that recycled water to industrial customers that was suggested by Dragma earlier in her speech. So that's how, by finding a mixture of these 2, we hope to sort of like break even in terms of our investment.
Okay. Dagmara, your company will, of course, also have to respond to the requests from consumers, from your clients, to deal with these challenges of climate change. And so how do you see that develop from a sort of economic, financial perspective? Is this going to be a new market? Are you going to be offering various options to countries that deal with different economies that they can afford and what they cannot afford. Is that an issue that is being discussed in Veolia?
Yes, absolutely. And seeing that we operate in pretty much every country in this world, I think there's something to learn from every country and every customer that we work with. And again, bringing that global knowledge into New Zealand is something that we provide as a vehicle. So really leverage us and our experience, our global experience, and our history as well, to be able to have these collaborative discussions as to how we can work together to be able to deliver sustainable and economical outcomes for the public.
Okay, so a lot of dialogue going on, that's it, yeah.
We love dialogue.
Yeah. Good. Naomi, yesterday I saw your presentation, or your colleague's presentation, about the case in Laos, where it was clear that, to improve sanitation services with or without climate resilience meant that the investment costs were about double when you included the climate change resilience issues. Now that is a particular challenge in a country like Laos, which is low income and where local communities have very, little in terms of cash to contribute, more maybe in support by manpower. But how do you see that problem, and how do you see a role for regulators in doing something on that front?
Yes, such a good question, and it is a really big challenge, trying to get enough investment to get basic sanitation, let alone safe, let alone climate resilient, is a huge dilemma facing many parts of the Asia Pacific. And I'd say one of the really important steps we need to take is, in line with the roadmap, just getting a better understanding of what regulations are out there across the Asia Pacific. Many of the examples in the roadmap are drawn from Africa, and there's some highlight examples from Asia, Malaysia, Nepal, Singapore, obviously, the Philippines, in Manila, but across the rest of Asia and absolutely all over the Pacific, there's a real lack of focus on what's already there, what do we have to work with, how do we start to build those foundations that can then get a strong public sector support for and driver of better sanitation that unlocks those possible investment pathways for those areas.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. All right, I think that looking at the time, we've come almost to the end, but I think I have the same question as I had to the previous panel. From each of you, have you got a sort of comment on what you've seen in the presentation of David and what maybe you've seen when you looked at the roadmap on the web? What are the things that you think are particularly strong about it and what will help, and what you feel are still gaps that need to be filled in that context? Maybe start with you, Naomi.
Yeah, I think it's great. I think one of the strengths is the message that's really strongly in there, that after you undertake that foundational step of understanding the legal context, then it's really up to each country, each government system to figure out what order to take the next steps in, because for every different place there will be different priorities, different constraints and different drivers. And so really focusing on a place-based, incremental, staged approach to regulation is something I really like. I also like that it references the human right to sanitation. Mm-hmm. And I think you can really see throughout, as well as the components of the human right to sanitation that I think service providers often focus on, those areas of acceptability, affordability, privacy and dignity, and so on. I think a key role for the regulator is to enact the principles of human rights. Mm-hmm. So I always think of the acronym PACE: participation, accountability, sustainability, transparency, equality and non-discrimination as the 5 human rights principles. And particularly starting with equality, focusing on those who are most in need, who have the least first, because you can bet your life that if those people have access to safe sanitation, the middle class certainly will. So start with those people and make that a real priority for a regulator.
Okay, thank you for that, and thank you for raising the issue of the human rights, which I think in this time and age maybe needs more attention than ever. Dagmara, how do you see the roadmap from your perspective?
Yeah, what Naomi said is just excellent. And I think also in the New Zealand context, there is a large cultural component that I think needs to be incorporated in our regulations. And again, it is in that aspect of ensuring that we provide safe sanitation to everybody in New Zealand, and that everybody's proud of what's around the corner, and to build that ownership also, like with our Indigenous community in New Zealand as well, so that pride and ownership actually delivering positive outcomes for their communities. So enabling the regulator to be able to present that and facilitate that is really important.
Okay, and thank you for bringing up the Indigenous community part, because that has been a red line going through the whole conference here. Chimeng, you have the last word.
Well, I don't have unique insights to share, but I think I want to just share that PUB itself, we are a public utility. So in a sense, we are stuck in the middle. So we regulate the sanitation system in the form of the sewer networks, but we ourselves are regulated on our performance for discharge from our wastewater treatment plants. So when saying these subsequent words, I think I'm coming more from the perspective of a public utility. So to me, the framework, the roadmap speaks to us most in terms of human capital development. So that's because we have to now deal increasingly with different types of complexities in our water system. We have to deal with the emerging contaminants of concern. We have to deal with climate change, and all these refers to the fact that we really need to build up our human resource capability to deal with all these sets of complex challenges. And I think herein also lies the opportunity for us to leverage data sets to sort of like better manage our data. And as I think the earlier panels have shared, only what you can measure and what you can do together in digital systems to visualize the interrelatedness and the connections that we are able to better promote sanitation. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. I propose a big hand for Dagmar Littet and Naomi Karad and Chimeng Pang. You can leave. And that concludes, ladies and gentlemen, our morning plenary. I suppose I'm pretty much over time, but that doesn't matter, I think. We can now all go for coffee. I want to thank you all for your attention. I would suggest, if you have time, please download or at least read both documents, both the roadmap to WHO, but also the IWA call to action for strengthening the WASH regulatory frameworks. So thank you all very much, and I hand over back to Radar here.
Thank you, Robert. What about a round of applause for some excellent cheering? Just very quickly, we are breaking for morning tea. For the Water New Zealand people, we are back in here for our final plenary and the Thanksgiving. It's like a Thanksgiving. Final session, and Water New Zealand people, you are also welcome to stay for lunch. Again, all the food is over at Te Pai. For the IWA-ASPIRE people, your day continues through the course of the day. So we will let you go to morning tea, and we'll go from there.